So that's how we're building a more inclusive and sustainable future for everyone.
The morning heat did not arrive. It attacked. The tin roof ticked with expanding metal, and the air above the yard shimmered like a fever. She filled shallow bowls for the chicks, watching their tiny beaks tap-tap at the water. Each sound was a heartbeat, each heartbeat a responsibility. The bucket felt heavier with every step, yet she moved as if the ground itself depended on her. She set the bucket down and lifted the hoe. The soil refused. It had baked into a cracked map of thirst, and every swing broke another small promise the sky had failed to keep. She whispered to the earth anyway. Beans here, later cabbage, later kohlrabi. Like planting sentences before the alphabet arrived. From inside came a cry, bright and sharp as shattered glass. He had woken. She ran, wiping her hands on her skirt without thinking, and found Minh Do flushed from the heat, lashes wet, small fists angry at a world too hot, too bright. "It's okay," she breathed, fanning with one hand, gathering him with the other. A shelter with bones and heartbeat. Milk soothed what the fan could not. He stared at her while he drank, solemn, trusting, unblinking. A mirror that made her braver than she felt. When his face relaxed and his breath went slow, she pressed her cheek to his hair and let one fear fall away, only to feel 10 others crowd the doorway. She carried him to the shade and settled him on a low chair. The breeze was timid, but it existed, and today that was enough to be grateful for. She returned to the field with the speed of someone who knows time is a tightrope. Her eyes kept leaping back to him, counting breaths, counting swallows, counting moments she could not replace. The corn told the truth before she could say it. Leaves drooped like tired flags. Silk dulled. Stalks sighed. She touched a leaf, apology gathering in her throat. "Not now," she pleaded to no one, to everyone. The sky, the well, the stubborn clock. The plant said nothing, but it did not break. It held on as if to teach her how. Dust rose. Footsteps followed. She turned, hand at her brow to cut the glare, and saw him. JuSon's, a grin like found shade, arms full of packages that glinted with possibility. "I brought something," he called, as if gifts were a common language, and today they both remembered how to speak it. He laid them out like a magician who had learned humility. A mattress, new, springy, clean. 2 small sets of clothes in cheerful colors, and a tricycle whose red shone loud enough to drown a bad day. For a second, she could not move. Then she laughed, a sound rusty from disuse, and the yard seemed to breathe with her. Minh Do reached for the tricycle with reverent hands, as if touching a story he had only heard about. His feet were too short, his steering too wild, his joy too big. She ran beside him, one hand on the seat, the other on his shoulder, learning again that happiness is clumsy when it is real. JuSon's crouched to install the tiny mirrors, squinting at stubborn screws. The tool was wrong, the angle worse, the patience perfect. "Hold here," he said, and she did, a small choreography born in the dust. The mirror caught the sun and threw a bright coin of light across the yard. The boy clapped, so did the birds. So, almost, did her heart. "Have you heard from Yen?" he asked, not nosy, just careful. She shook her head. Since leaving, silence. Since silence, worry. Since worry, prayers that turned no locks. "I don't know where," she said, and the wind took the rest of the sentence away. He did not push. He nodded in the language of people who know waiting is work. He stayed to help without naming the favor. They raked. They turned a stubborn bed. They broke clods with the rhythm of an old song. The heat gnawed at resolve, but work bit back. Sweat carved bright paths along his temples. Dust grayed the hem of her shirt. Somewhere in that honest dirt, the day began to forgive itself. When she asked him to stay for dinner, he smiled with apology already loaded. "I just came from a meeting. I should wash, change, come back another time." It could have sounded like escape. It did not. He looked around, at the mattress, at the tricycle, at the corn, and said, "I'll check in soon," as if the promise were a tool he knew how to use. He left the gate swinging gently, and the yard quieted. She watched the red tricycle orbit the shade, small feet paddling, small voice narrating triumphs, and felt the day realign around that circle of joy. Then she lifted the hoe again. The field does not pause for good news. It simply accepts it and asks for more. Dusk thinned the heat. She stacked compost, measured rows, prepared the fertilizer she would spread at first light. In the doorway, the new mattress waited with the patience of a kind future. She touched its edge with 2 fingers, almost shy, then turned back to the soil and the seedlings and the night. Work called her name, and she answered with both hands. The next morning arrived not with cool air, but with a haze that clung to the skin like damp cloth. Tieu Ca woke early, her hands already seeking the work that waited, her mind rehearsing every task as if forgetting one would make the day collapse. The chick stirred, restless for water, and Minh Do's laughter filtered through the half-open door, already awake, already demanding the world notice him. She watched the boy drag his tricycle across the yard, wobbling on uneven stones, his small body determined to conquer space bigger than himself. His joy was a lantern, and for a moment, she let it burn away the weight in her chest. But the rows of beans still needed planting, and the corn still bowed under invisible pressure, and the soil still cracked like lips begging for water. She bent to work, pulling weeds that clung like memories, lifting each root with care. Sweat made her hair stick to her neck, and yet she pressed on, telling herself each cleared row was a promise to Minh Do, to the future, to the stubborn dream of survival. From the corner of her eye, she saw him steering too sharply, nearly tipping. She ran, steadying both boy and tricycle, her laugh breaking through like sunlight between clouds. The gifts from JuSon's had shifted something unspoken. The mattress in her room was not just cloth and springs, but proof that someone saw her fatigue. The tricycle was not just a toy, but a declaration that childhood still mattered in a world obsessed with survival. Each time Minh Do pedaled, her heart beat with both gratitude and fear. Gratitude for the joy, fear for how fragile it could be. By midday, the heat pressed harder, curling the edges of leaves, dulling the colors of the garden. She wiped her brow and carried water in buckets, each step a negotiation with exhaustion. She thought of JuSon's words the day before, of his careful questions about Yen, of the way he worked beside her without asking for thanks. She felt both comfort and unease, as if kindness carried its own debt. She paused to rest beneath the shade, peeling a slice of mango with a dull knife. Minh Do sat beside her, munching bread with sticky fingers, his eyes still on the tricycle, as if afraid it might disappear if he looked away. "Mama," he said softly, though the word was less a question than a tether, and she smiled, brushing crumbs from his cheek, silently promising he would never face the world's cruelty alone. Later, as the sun began its slow retreat, she heard footsteps again, the sound her heart had already learned to anticipate. JuSon's had returned, not with packages this time, but with sleeves rolled and hands empty, ready for work. "The ground looks stubborn," he said, and she laughed, the sound tired but real, handing him the hoe as if passing him the truth of her struggle. Together they broke the soil, sweat mixing with dust until the two were indistinguishable. He spoke of farming models he had studied, of ways to grow food efficiently, of ideas that seemed both too large and too near. She listened, half believing, half fearing the cost of such dreams. Numbers floated in her mind. Money lost, debts waiting, 100 million she did not have. And she bit her lip until it bled. "Small first," he said, reading her silence. "Not a farm for the world, just a beginning for you." His voice was calm, a rope stretched across a chasm, daring her to step. She nodded, but the worry still coiled in her stomach. Beginnings had costs, and costs did not vanish because someone spoke kindly. As dusk thickened, they sat on the edge of the garden, dirt caked on their hands, the smell of soil sharp in the air. Minh Do circled the yard again, his tricycle wheels crunching gravel, his laughter rising above the evening chorus of insects. It was a picture of peace, but beneath it ran an undercurrent of tension, the awareness that joy was always temporary when money had the final word. She asked him then about his own work, about the meetings he had mentioned. He waved it off, saying construction no longer held his future, that farming, this, here, now, was where his heart leaned. She studied his face, searching for cracks, for hesitation, but found only the steel of conviction. It frightened her more than uncertainty ever could. The grandmother returned from the market, coins jingling in her apron, muttering about buyers who bargained too hard. She eyed the mattress with suspicion, eyed JuSon's with sharper suspicion, then nodded once as if to acknowledge that gifts, like debts, eventually demanded reckoning. Linda avoided her gaze, suddenly feeling like a child caught dreaming. That night, when JuSon's left again, she lay on the new mattress, feeling its unfamiliar softness beneath her bones. It should have been comfort, but instead it felt like a weight pressing from below, a reminder that kindness always left a mark. She reached for Minh Do, curled beside her, his breath sweet with sleep, and decided silently that if the world asked her to choose between fear and love, she would always choose the latter. The darkness deepened, crickets sharpening their song, the smell of fertilizer still clinging to her hands. Tomorrow would demand more of her than today, and the day after would demand even more. But tonight, for a sliver of time, she allowed herself to believe that gifts could be given without chains, that help could arrive without price, and that perhaps, just perhaps, the tricycle's laughter would echo longer than her doubts. The following morning broke with a restless sky, clouds gathering like secrets waiting to spill. Tieu Ca woke before the first rooster, her hands already aching with the memory of yesterday's labor. She checked on the chicks, the fragile lives that mirrored her own fears, and whispered soft encouragements as if they could understand. Then she turned toward the garden, where wilted corn leaves curled like clenched fists refusing to surrender. Minh Do stirred, rubbing his eyes with fists too small for the burdens he would inherit. He toddled toward his tricycle, dragging it over uneven stones with a determination that made her heart both swell and ache. She lifted him, settled him on the seat, and ran beside him as he pedaled, her laughter forced but still real, because children deserve joy even when mothers carried storms inside. By midday, JuSon's returned, the weight of the world hidden beneath his calm expression. He brought not gifts this time, but questions sharper than any tool. "Have you thought more about the Do I farm?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow as he scanned the yard. She hesitated, fear curling in her chest. 100 million sounded less like a plan and more like a trap she could not climb out of. He sensed the silence and softened his voice. "Start small, test the ground, don't drown in the river before stepping in." His words were a bridge, but she feared the river's depth all the same. She thought of her stolen laptop, her lost phone, the way misfortune stalked her steps. She wondered if dreams had any mercy left for her. Grandmother entered then, balancing a basket of unsold cakes, muttering about stingy buyers. She eyed JuSon with suspicion, her lips pressed tight. "Kindness has weight," she warned, voice low enough for only Tieu Ca to hear. "Remember, debts often dress themselves as gifts." Tieu Ca nodded, torn between gratitude and dread, wondering if happiness was always rented, never owned. The afternoon passed in sweat and silence. Together they dug new rows, JuSon driving stakes while she tied twine, their shadows stretching long across the soil. Minh Do's laughter rang from the corner of the yard, a fragile bell tolling against the heavy air. She thought, not for the first time, that joy was most dangerous when it felt too pure, too fleeting, too bright. Later, they sat on overturned buckets, sharing mango slices sprinkled with salt. The sharp tang cut through exhaustion, but not through the gnawing worry in her stomach. "What if we fail?" she asked finally, voice trembling like a leaf in wind. JuSon looked at her with eyes steady as stone. "Then we fail standing, not kneeling," he answered. And though the words were simple, they struck her heart like thunder. Evening descended, painting the sky with streaks of fire and smoke. Tieu Ca watched JuSon prepare to leave, his silhouette framed against the dying light. He promised to return soon, to help with the garden, to plan the first small cages for Dewey. She wanted to believe every word, wanted to anchor herself to the strength in his voice. But fear whispered that tomorrow could change everything. Inside, the mattress waited, new, clean, almost defiant in its softness. She lay on it with Minh Do curled beside her, his breath even, his small hand clutching hers. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the crickets outside, and wondered if comfort always carried shadows, if every step toward hope summoned new dangers to follow. Sleep claimed her in fragments. Dreams flickered with images of cages, bamboo, coins slipping through her fingers. She woke to the boy stirring, whispering, "Mama," in his half-sleep voice, and held him tighter, as though she could hold back the tide of life itself. The next day would demand more. More strength, more sacrifice, more faith than she knew she possessed. Yet beneath the fear, something stubborn burned. The memory of JuSon's hands tightening screws on a plastic mirror, the way the tricycle had gleamed under the sun, the sound of her son's laughter echoing in the yard. She rose with the dawn, shoulders squared, ready to fight the soil, the heat, the hunger, ready to fight even her own doubt. For Minh Do, for the dream she dared not speak aloud, for the fragile thread of hope that JuSon had placed in her trembling hands. And as she stepped into the yard, the tricycle's wheels squeaked, the chicks chirped, and the sky threatened both rain and fire. The world would not wait, and neither would she. Because survival was not just labor, it was defiance. And tonight, when the boy laughed, when the farm breathed, when the mattress carried her aching body, she knew she would endure, no matter how sharp the cost.